Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are going super small to explore the world of cells.
That's right.
We're talking the JAK-STAT signaling pathway.
Oh yeah, one of the coolest things in cell biology.
I agree. Our listener sent us a great article all about it from Assay Genie.
Assay Genie. They always put out interesting stuff.
They do. So in this deep dive, we'll be unpacking this crucial system that cells use to communicate with each other.
You got it.
We're going to find out how they talk, why this pathway is so important for research, and what happens when things go wrong.
It's like a microscopic conversation happening all the time.
Exactly. It is a lot like that.
And these conversations are vital for keeping us alive and functioning.
So true. So JAK-STAT is all about how cells get messages right.
Yeah.
And how they turn those messages into actions.
Precisely. It's like a super efficient postal service delivering critical instructions within the cell.
So instead of letters and packages, we have these things called cytokines and growth factors acting as signals.
Like special delivery messages. I like that analogy. So these signals show up at the cell surface.
Yep.
And that's where JAK-STAT comes in.
That's where the magic happens.
Now, the article mentions JAKs and STATs.
Yes, the stars of the show.
Can you tell us more about them?
Absolutely. So first you have your Janus Kinases, or JAKs for short.
JAKs?
They're like the gatekeepers,
Yeah.
just hanging out near the cell membrane, waiting for a signal.
Waiting for a signal to activate the pathway?
Right. And there are actually 4 different types of JAKs. JK1, JK2, JK3, and Type 2.
4 types.
4 types. Think of them as specialized postal workers, each handling different types of mail, different signals.
Okay, so the JAKs get the message, but then what? Who actually delivers it?
That's where the stats strut their stuff. They are the signal transducers and activators of transcription.
Signal transducers and activators of transcription.
It's a mouthful, right? But basically, they're the messengers.
Messengers.
Yeah, they carry those instructions all the way from the cell surface to the nucleus, the cell's control center.
Wow, and there are 7 different stats? That's a lot of messengers.
7. I know, right? It sounds like a lot to keep track of.
It does.
But trust me, it all works out. Each stat has a very specific job, responding to certain signals and then triggering specific actions in the nucleus.
So it's kind of like a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. The right instructions get to the right place at the right time. It's all very organized.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture, but I still need a play-by-play. Like, how does this whole process actually work, step by step?
Okay, picture this. A cytokine, that signaling molecule we talked about, comes up to the cell.
Okay.
It binds to a receptor on the cell's surface. It's like a key fitting into a lock.
Gotcha.
This binding is what triggers the activation of our gatekeepers, the JKs.
So the cytokine is like the key that unlocks the whole pathway.
You got it. Now, once the JKs are activated,
Yeah.
they attach this little chemical tag to the receptor.
A tag.
Yeah, like a little signal flare. And you know what that flare does? It attracts the stats.
So the stats see the signal and head over.
Exactly. And the JAKs attach the same chemical tag to the stats.
To the stats.
It's like they're giving them a power boost
A power boost for what?
to make the trip to the nucleus. They need that boost to carry the instructions from the original cytokine signal all the way there.
Okay, so now the stats are on the move. They've got their instructions, and they're heading to the nucleus.
Right. And remember, the nucleus is like the brain of the cell.
It's where the DNA is stored.
Exactly. And once those stats arrive, they bind to specific DNA sequences.
So they're interacting directly with the DNA.
They are. And this binding, this is the really cool part, can either turn genes on or off,
Wow.
leading to a whole cascade of cellular responses. It's really powerful stuff.
I never realized these tiny messengers could actually control gene activity. That is super cool.
Right. It's like a chain reaction of molecular events.
But I'm still curious, why should we care so much about this pathway?
That's the big question, right?
It all seems so microscopic. How does it actually affect us in the real world?
Well, let me tell you. The JAK-STAT pathway has its fingers in a lot of pies.
Okay.
It impacts tons of crucial bodily functions.
Like what?
Well, let's start with the immune system. This pathway is absolutely essential for how our bodies fight off infections.
So when we get sick, JAK-STAT is helping our immune cells communicate and coordinate their attack.
You got it. Cytokines, remember those signaling molecules?
Yeah.
They're the key players in immune responses, and they rely heavily on the JAK-STAT pathway for their effectiveness.
So it's like this whole communication network that allows our immune system to function properly.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
There's more.
Oh yeah, much more. JAK-STAT signaling is also essential for cell growth and specialization. This process is called cell differentiation, and it's kind of like, well,
Kind of like what?
Like students choosing different majors in college, each cell specializes in a specific field to contribute to the overall function of the tissue or organ.
So JAK-STAT helps make sure our bodies develop correctly.
That's right. Without it, things would be very chaotic.
I can imagine. But what about when this pathway isn't working correctly?
Now that's when things can get a bit tricky.
Tricky how?
Well, you've seen dysregulation of the JAK-STAT pathway has been linked to a bunch of diseases. We're talking cancer, autoimmune disorders, and even inflammatory conditions.
Now that's what I call tricky. We need to explore that more.
Agreed.
But I think that's a topic for part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds like a plan. You know, it's funny because we were just talking about JAK-STAT helping our bodies develop properly.
Right.
But when this pathway goes haywire,
Oh.
it can actually be a big problem.
Like how big of a problem?
Well, it can actually contribute to the development of cancer.
Whoa, hold on. How does a communication issue in our cells
Yeah.
lead to something as serious as cancer?
It all comes back to that postal service analogy.
Okay.
Imagine if the JAK-STAT pathway is constantly activated.
Constantly.
Like it's just sending nonstop growth signals to cells.
And that's bad because it's like giving those cells a free pass to multiply uncontrollably. Ah, so it's like a runaway train?
Exactly. A runaway train of cellular signals.
I get it. So are there any examples of this, like
Oh, yeah, definitely.
in specific types of cancer?
There are certain types of leukemia
Okay.
where mutations in the JK genes can actually make the pathway stay switched on all the time.
Yeah.
And that causes white blood cells to just multiply like crazy.
That's scary stuff. So it's not just about messages not being delivered.
Right.
It's also about them being sent at the wrong times or even being, like, completely messed up.
Exactly. It's all about balancing control. And when that goes out the window...
Bad things can happen.
Exactly. Now, are there any other ways that this pathway is linked to other diseases?
Oh, I'm sure there are.
There are. For example, let's take rheumatoid arthritis.
Okay.
It's an autoimmune disorder
Yeah, I've heard of it.
that causes painful inflammation in the joints.
Ouch.
Right. In this case, the JAK-STAT pathway is involved in producing way too many inflammatory cytokines. Way too many. And these cytokines cause all that pain and tissue damage.
So in rheumatoid arthritis, it's like the JAK-STAT pathway is sending out too many SOS signals, basically.
Pretty much. And that's why researchers are so interested in this pathway.
Why?
Well, if we can figure out how to control it,
Yeah.
we could potentially develop some really effective treatments for all sorts of diseases.
That's pretty amazing. So the goal is to basically restore balance.
Yes, to restore balance in this communication system.
And that would help with things like cancer and autoimmune disorders.
It could be a game changer for so many people.
Okay, so we touched on JAK-STAT and the immune system earlier.
Uh-huh.
Can we dive a bit deeper into that?
Of course.
What do you want to know?
Well, first, could you remind us what cytokines are and why they're important?
Sure. Cytokines are like the language of the immune system.
The language.
Yeah. They're signaling molecules that allow immune cells to talk to each other.
So they're like little messengers. Exactly. They carry messages that can trigger inflammation, activate other immune cells, or even suppress the immune response.
So they can either ramp things up or calm things down.
Exactly. It all depends on the situation.
And JAK-STAT is like the interpreter for these messages.
Precisely. It's the bridge between those external signals, the cytokines, and the nucleus where all the action happens.
Okay, so we have cytokines sending out messages.
Yeah.
JAK-STAT is interpreting them.
Uh-huh.
And the nucleus is responding by activating or deactivating genes.
Exactly. It's like this complex communication network inside each cell.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. And this network is constantly buzzing with activity, especially when the immune system is fighting off an infection.
Okay, can you give us an example of that?
Sure. Let's say a virus enters your body.
Okay.
Certain immune cells release these cytokines called interferons.
Interferons.
They're like the first responders,
Got it.
and they activate the JAK-STAT pathway in nearby cells.
And what does that do?
Well, it triggers a whole cascade of events to help fight off the virus.
Like what?
Genes involved in antiviral defense get switched on,
Okay.
and that leads to the production of proteins that can actually block the virus from replicating.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is. And it also alerts other immune cells to the threat.
So it's like a domino effect?
Exactly. The interferons sound the alarm, and the JAK-STAT pathway amplifies the signal to rally the troops.
This is making me appreciate my immune system a lot more.
Me too. It's a pretty amazing system.
So understanding JAK-STAT is crucial for developing new treatments for immune-related diseases then.
Absolutely.
Huh.
By targeting specific parts of this pathway, we can fine-tune the immune response.
Fine-tune it how?
Well, We could potentially boost it to fight infections or suppress it to prevent autoimmune attacks.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
This is all incredibly fascinating.
It is.
And I'm definitely starting to see the bigger picture here.
Good.
But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the research behind all of this.
Okay.
The article you sent was from Assay Genie.
Ah, yeah.
And the author is Umang Tiagi.
She's brilliant.
What can you tell us about her and her work?
Well, Umang is doing some really cutting-edge research
Yeah.
in the field of cellular signaling.
Cutting edge.
Oh, yeah. She's really pushing the boundaries of what we know.
Yes.
Her focus is on really understanding the complexities of these pathways, and this particular article does a fantastic job of explaining a very complex topic.
It really does.
It's informative and engaging, and it's clear that she's passionate about making science accessible to a wider audience.
I agree. Before we wrap up part 2, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave with our listener?
Well, I think what's really mind-boggling is that this whole intricate communication system that we've been discussing, it's happening inside every single one of your trillions of cells right now.
Wow.
Cytokines are being released, JAKs are being activated, STATs are racing towards the nucleus, and genes are constantly being switched on and off.
That's insane.
It is. And it's all happening in response to your body's ever-changing needs. It's like a microscopic symphony of activity on a scale that's almost impossible to comprehend.
That's such a vivid image.
It is, isn't it? It
Yeah.
really makes you realize that we're not just individuals, but we're entire universes.
Universes.
Yes, composed of trillions of tiny worlds, each with its own complex communication network.
That's amazing. And the JAK-STAT pathway is just one tiny piece of that puzzle.
Exactly. It makes you wonder what other secrets are hidden within ourselves.
Yeah. It really is amazing to think about how complex our bodies are.
You know, and as we learn more about these pathways like JAK-STAT,
Right.
it just becomes even more clear how connected everything is within ourselves.
It really does. It's like all these tiny pieces working together to keep us going.
It's true. And, you know, the JAK-STAT pathway doesn't just work by itself.
It doesn't.
Nope. It's constantly interacting with all these other signaling pathways.
Other pathways.
Yeah. Creating this super complex web of communication that controls pretty much every aspect of our biology.
Wow. So it's not just a postal service then.
Not quite.
It's more like a whole cellular internet.
That's a great way to put it.
Like all these different pathways acting like websites all linked together.
Exactly. And just like the internet, we still have so much to learn about this cellular communication network.
That's pretty exciting, actually.
It is. Every new discovery brings us closer to understanding how our bodies work.
And hopefully how to fix things when they go wrong.
Exactly. It's all about using this knowledge to develop new therapies for all sorts of diseases.
Well, it's mind-blowing to think about all this stuff happening at the molecular level that we're not even aware of.
I know, right?
And yet it all comes together to create who we are and how we function.
It really is amazing when you think about it.
It is. And this deep dive has definitely made me feel incredibly small.
Small.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to the vastness of everything happening inside my own body.
I see what you mean.
But it also makes me feel incredibly connected to everything around me.
That's the beauty of science, isn't it?
It is. It makes you appreciate the big picture and the tiniest details all at the same time.
Well said. It sounds like we've explored the JAK-STAT pathway pretty thoroughly today.
I think so. But as we've learned, there's always more to discover.
Always. And that's what makes science so exciting. It's a never-ending journey of discovery.
That's a great way to put it.
Mm.
Well, on that note, it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Already?
I know, time flies when you're having fun exploring the world of cells.
That's the truth.
But seriously, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure. It's always fun to dive into these topics and share the wonders of science.
And a huge thank you to our listener for sending in this topic and joining us on this adventure.
Yes, thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring the intricate world of the JAK-STAT signaling pathway.
It's been a blast.
It has. So until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the world around you.
And remember, the most amazing discoveries are often hidden in the smallest of places.
That's so true. Bye, everyone.
See ya.